The Simpsons is one of the most iconic series of all time that has a lot of seasons, and in those same we have seen some quite curious and powerful objects. So today we are here to see what is the most powerful object in The Simpsons. The tobacco. We can see it in the chapter called Homer the Farmer, and this would be a combination between a tomato and tobacco and a pinch of radiation. This kind of fruit is a rather strange combination, and with a pretty bad taste but addictive thanks to tobacco. It seems that humans only generate a certain addiction, but this has more effect on animals since when ingesting it they become addicted and much more aggressive, and basically that would be how the tobacco works. So for not offering anything else I leave it as one of the weakest. Guatemalan insanity peppers are seen in the chapter of The Mysterious Voyage of Homer, where we can see that Homer tries several types of chili until he arrives with Chief Wiggum, who presents him with these peppers. The appearance of these peppers is quite peculiar since they are red with some phosphorescent greenish lines all around, and when trying them we can see that first, without even biting them, they can burn the tongue. Afterwards, when ingested, these cause a very strong burning sensation in the stomach as well as quite strong hallucinations due to the spiciness. Apart from the strong hallucinations and the explosive diarrhea that could cause the next day, I don't see any more use for it, so that's why I leave it here. Forget Me Shot is a drink prepared by Mo in Chapter 9 of Season 19. This drink or beverage is a combination of liquor, herbs, blackberry gin dog. I discharge pickle vodka, the red stripe of a toothpaste, and the special ingredient, the poison of Louisiana. The effect of this drink is quite simple since only one shot is able to erase the memory of the last 24 hours of a person. As we see in the chapter, Homer drinks it to forget that Marge wants to organize a surprise party for him, and it works quite well. Mo also mentions that this drink in excess can cause people to forget everything, so the effect of Forget Me Shot is very powerful. And that is why it stays with the third place in this section. The squared hamburgers make their appearance in the Little House of Horror number 20. These hamburgers from the Krusty Burger have the characteristic that the cows used for this meat are first fed with a meat top quality. The power or effect of this hamburger is that whoever eats it becomes a kind of zombie a few seconds after eating it. As we see in the chapter, this hamburger caused a zombie apocalypse in Springfield, and I suppose that everywhere there is a Krusty Burger. And basically that would be the effect that the burger has, turning everyone into a zombie, and from what we see in the chapter, the only cure is for Bart to bathe everyone's food, so without this, the world would go to ruin. I think this hamburger has a fairly large destructive potential, so that's why I put it here. Is a kind of slime that fell from space in the Horror House 17. And as I said before, Homer eats this kind of slime, which causes him to have a voracious appetite, making him eat everything that he finds in his path, including people and animals. Apart from being insatiable, this slime allows Homer to grow every time he eats, making him huge in the end. We must also add that Homer obtains super digestion, super strength, as he is able to carry very heavy objects, and super resistance, as he can withstand police gunshots, turning Homer into a powerful monster. This one offers good powers if we see it in a certain way, but to me it doesn't seem so good to be a giant mass that always has to be eating, but all these characteristics of the stain puts it in this position. This makeup shotgun is an invention of Homer that we can see in the chapter called The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, that, as its name suggests, it is a shotgun with 2 cans of paint in the barrel that is capable of firing a layer of makeup. Homer says that this invention could be useful for women who don't have much time to put on makeup, although Marge mentions that it is out of calibration and it wouldn't work. For having an almost useless function, it is not good calibrated and not offer anything else because I leave it as the weakest object on this list. The Defender is a fairly simple weapon, but it could be very effective. This was seen in the chapter called Mona's Inheritance, and the defender would be more than anything a chain metal attached to concrete brick. Homer has this object in his house to defend himself from possible intruders. If we think about it a little, this one could do quite a bit of damage to whoever they throw a piece of concrete at the head of. But it is also a very simple object that falls behind the following on this list, although let me know what you think of the defender. The Krusty doll is one of the most remembered objects of the Little House of Horror. This doll was bought by Homer in a store called House of the Evil, and the store clerk gave this object to Homero, warning him that it has a horrible curse, although with the purchase of the doll they also gave him free ghoul. Great offer. The curse of this Krusty doll is that, like Chucky, can move and talk on its own, threatening and attacking Homer on several occasions. In addition to being quite skilled and strong considering his size, since he was able to subdue Homer and carry objects larger than him. The disadvantage with this small doll is that his evil side can be deactivated with a simple switch that he has on his back, stopping it from attacking, and in fact he just started using it as a servant. So this toy is fine in this position. The Pookadook is a children's book between many quotes that appeared in the Little House of Horror 33. March reads this book to Maggie, which says that the person who reads this book will be possessed by the spirit of the Pookadook, and this spirit possesses March, giving her some supernatural powers such as being able to fly, having some strength resistance, among other things. These supernatural powers are not appreciated very well since the chapter segment does not last long, but I think they are good abilities. But the great disadvantage here is that the possessed cannot control his body, so it would practically be useless to have it since it is more a disadvantage than an advantage. And also apart from that, the possessed could be freed with the classic power of love, and that's why it is here. The Avenging Glove is an invention that appears in a mini-story in the chapter Revenge, is a dish that is served 3 times. In this story told by Lisa, we see that the school nerds are fed up with bullies, so they decide to invent this gauntlet. The Avenger Glove has the power or ability to carry out different punishments that a school bully would carry out, such as the classic wedgie, pinch the nipples, and also stop hitting you, among many others. When selecting the punishment, the glove launches a kind of ray that complies with the order assigned to it, so anyone who is hit by the ray will be affected by this punishment. The truth is that it is a quite interesting object that, from what we saw, did not present very specific disadvantages, but I think that only having a couple of punishments can be one of them. The Golem is seen in another chapter of the House of Horror. This is a giant statue that was made to defend people. The Golem was found by Bart on the backstage of the Krusty show, and it has the peculiarity that if a paper is inserted into the Golem's mouth, it will perform the action that is written in the chapter. It was used for a bunch of tasks. I see a lot of potential in the Golem since it is quite big and strong, and as I say, it can carry out any task that is asked of it. The disadvantage here is that it seems that the tasks have to be common or not very beyond its capabilities. But still, I think this Golem can do quite a few things that are useful, and that's why it stays here. The Time Toaster is another object seen in the Little House of Horror number 5, and this is a toaster that was repaired by Homer in his garage, adding electronic parts and a plutonium bar, making this toaster capable of making him travel in time, and its function is very simple, unlike other time machines, since you only have to lower the lever, and it will take you to the user to the past. And when the bread is ready, it will return him to the present. From what we saw in the chapter, this machine is only capable of traveling to the past and returning the user to the present. So it is not as powerful as a conventional time machine. In addition, it has the disadvantage that if you make a minimal change in the past, your present will be affected. The cloning hammock was seen in the Little House of Terror number 13. In this chapter, Homer bought a new hammock from a seller since his broke, and he warned him that the fabric of the hammock is a mix of comfort and evil. The function of this is very simple, since you only have to make a couple of turns with someone lying down on it and generates a clone of the person. The clones that the hammock generates are not very smart, but they share similar physical characteristics with the original user. This could be used to build your own army since the hammock does not seem to have a limit of uses, so that could make thousands and thousands of clones. The disadvantage with this hammock is that the clones, although they are not as smart as the original subject, could turn against him, as we saw what happened to Homer since they tried to replace him. Although here it could be identified easily to the clones since they do not have a belly button. Then the hammock is a rather curious object with several possibilities, so I think it deserves to be here. The chronotrike is an invention of Professor Frink seen in the chapter called Springfield Up. This is a kind of bicycle with a giant wheel behind it that acts as a time machine. Unlike Homer's toaster, it seems that with this one you can travel wherever you want since the professor uses it to travel to the past and tell his younger self to talk to girls, but it doesn't turn out very well. Let's say the power of a time machine is huge if you know how to take advantage of it and if you are careful with what you do, since you can get many advantages from it. But it still has the disadvantage that if you change something minimal, you could greatly affect your timeline. In addition to that, you need to pedal a bit to be able to use it, which is not very useful if you need to use it quickly. The reanimate machine is an object seen in the Horror House 26. This object was invented by Sideshow Bob, using some magical objects. Bob uses this machine to revive and reanimate Bart multiple times, and thus be able to have fun with him. If we think about it, this machine is quite powerful since a person can be reanimated, even if it is only his ashes. So it grants the advantage of giving unlimited lives, which means that you could do whatever you want without any real consequence to your life. In addition to reviving people, this machine can also return objects to their initial state. And finally, if several pieces or things are put together in the machine's beam, it will be able to put them together, as we saw that Bart made Patino into a kind of chicken. The only the apparent disadvantage is that you will receive a huge electricity bill, but because of the advantages it offers, we decided to leave it here. The Book of Magic and Spells is seen in the Playhouse of Horror number 3. This book was found by Bart in the occult section of the library, and we don't see much of the content of this book, but from what we can see it is quite powerful. What the book contains, as its name says, it is a varied amount of spells and information about paranormal creatures that could be useful to the user in different situations. As we see, Bart uses it to try to revive Snowball first, but instead he revives all the people who were in the graveyard. Later in the chapter he uses a spell which turns Lisa into a snail, and finally, he returns all the zombies to their place. Without a doubt, if we had seen more spells that this book contained, perhaps it could be higher up in the video. But for now, I think it's okay to leave it here. The Pazuzu statue was seen in the House of Terror 28, where Homer ordered this statue as a gift for Maggie. This statue, like the Pukaduk, is able to possess to people who look directly into the eyes, but the big difference with the aforementioned is that this seems to be a much more powerful entity. The user who is possessed will be able to levitate, have Pirok as telekinesis, among many other powers. These are powers even more powerful than those of the Pukaduk, but it also has the disadvantage that the possessed cannot control his body unless you have a very, very dark soul like Bart's. Then yes, you could control the powers that this demon offers you. Then I think that the Pazuzu statue is quite powerful and an object that deserves to be around here. The Death Tome is a very obvious parody of the Dead Note scene in the House of Horror 33. The Lisa of this story meets the Death Tome, which has rules quite similar to the Death Note, such as that if a person's name is written in it, they will die. In addition, you can also specify the way in which they will die. If you have seen Death Note, you will know that this notebook can be quite powerful, because if used correctly you can finish off whoever you want just by having the name and the face. So this object has a pretty big potential, but the only disadvantage that I see is that this notebook has the condition that you can't repeat the way in which people die. So it would have to be very clever or creative in the way it is used. But well, the Tome of Death is a pretty powerful object that deserves to be in the top 5 of this video. The hood of the Grim Reaper is an object seen in the House of Terror 14, as I said, is an item of clothing that Homer takes from the Grim Reaper, which makes him become the new Grim Reaper, giving him a variety of powers that are quite good. Apparently, this object gives Homer a lot of strength. More than the most important thing is the power that with a single touch he can send people to the Creator. Another thing that itself does not look very good is a kind of power that allows him to summon scrolls from the people who are about to have dying, and he has to kill them as a job. And also the classic Grim Reaper's scythe. The only disadvantage I see is that if you don't fulfill the assigned job of killing people, God can punish you, although we see that Homer easily escapes from him. For me, this is a very interesting object and very powerful at the same time, since with a single touch, it can defeat you, and well, for I'll leave that here. We come to a rather powerful object seen in the Little House of Horror 14. Bart and Milhouse find this object in some old coupons from old magazines. It is seen that this is a kind of stopwatch that can stop time. Bart orders it, and when it arrives he proves its power by stopping time and causing mischief throughout the city. The operation of the clock is quite simple, since you only have to press the top and time will stop, causing whoever possesses it to be able to do literally whatever he wants to do what is around him. In addition to stopping time, he also hides another function, since he is able to change reality, as we see what Liz did at the end, making her family transform into various things. But not all are advantages, since as we saw in the same chapter, if the watch breaks it can leave the wearer trapped forever. Yet this object proved to be quite powerful with multiple functions that could be useful in many situations, and that's why it earns this place. The radioactive control appears in the Horror House number 9. This is an ordinary remote control that Bart modifies by putting a highly radioactive plutonium rod where the batteries should be, which causes this object to have powers such as changing the color, turning back time, and making it possible to enter the TV. It is not seen very well what other functions does this control have, but for the functions it performs, I also suppose that it can pause time, fast forward it, among other things, but without a doubt an object that, although we saw very little of it in this chapter, has quite a lot of potential that, with good use, would become one of the most powerful objects in this series. And we would arrive with, in my opinion, the most powerful object in this entire series, which we saw in the second House of Terror, would be the monkey hand. Homer, as always, buys this hand from a rather strange seller who explains to him that this hand can grant any wish. It can grant a total of 4 wishes, and after asking for each one of these the hand will lower a finger indicating how many wishes are left. The wishes that are fulfilled, this hand does not seem to have any kind of limit, so whoever possesses it can let their imagination fly and ask for anything, turning it into a quite powerful object. But it has 2 huge disadvantages. The first, and the most, it is obvious that there are only 4 wishes, although I think that the option of asking for more wishes could be applied here. But in reality, this does not seem to be necessary, since it seems that this hand is reset every time it changes hands. The second disadvantage, and the most serious one, is that with each wish come consequences that I honestly don't think are very serious, and I also suppose you can apply the one of wishing that there is no curse. Although when Flanders uses this hand, it doesn't seem to present any kind of problem. So for me, this is the most powerful object we've ever had seen in The Simpsons so far. But let me know in the comments which one do you think is the most powerful, or what are your 3 most powerful objects in the entire series. And leave us ideas for more videos and your opinion on which is the most powerful object of them all.